Is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Canadian Electricity Association's Conversation webinar series. The CEA is the voice of the electricity industry in Canada. My name is Farhan Mirza, and I'm pleased to be your host for today's session. The Conversation series features presentations from CEA's corporate partners, and the series will highlight a variety of Canadian and international solutions to current and future challenges faced by the industry. Working with CEA's corporate partners, these webinars have been developed to be of specific interest to those working in the electric utility space from generation through to the customer. For a list of upcoming sessions, please check out our website at www.electricity.ca. Before we get going, I'd like to go over some housekeeping items. Our session today is scheduled to go from 1 to 2 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Questions can be asked, and we'd encourage you to do so as they come to mind by typing them into the chat function you see on your screen, and they will be answered at the end of the presentation. A brief survey will be sent to webinar participants following the session today, and we'd very much appreciate your feedback and are interested to hear about any topics you'd like to hear covered in this series in the future. Also, please keep an eye out for future webinars and events through CEA's monthly newsletter, Current Affairs. With over 6,000 subscribers, Current Affairs, much like the national newspaper, is the place to go for Canadian industry news as we connect the national value chain from generation through to the customer. And if you'd like to receive Current Affairs, you can subscribe to this free publication on CEA's website, again at electricity.ca. Today, Hexagon will be presenting our webinar on joint use management, streamlining a traditionally onerous process. For many utilities, managing joint use permit requests is an onerous and inaccurate process that requires significant resources to capture, track, and process permits. Today, you'll discover how your utility can automate, manage, and simplify the joint use permitting process via a web-based solution that directly leverages your GIS data. Through today's session, you'll learn how you can automate and improve the accuracy and reporting of your joint use permits records, utilizing a workflow that is shared between you and your third-party partners to track each permit from submittal to the approval process. Our presenters today are Steve Bruton, industry consultant from Hexagon, and Helda Bragas, distribution engineer at London Hydro. Gentlemen, I'd like to welcome you today to our conversation series, and I'll turn the webinar over to you.
Steve, you're going to want to unmute to join us and maybe join us on webcam as well.
How often do we can start talking and forget that our mute is on? I know we've all done that. So I just want to introduce Hexagon if I could. We're a leader in smart solutions for utilities and communications. Our software helps utilities plan, engineer, and build and operate everything networks, all the changing networks that deliver the products to their customers. Over 600 forward-thinking and innovative electric, gas, water, and communication companies use Hexagon to manage their network model across the world. We've been helping these companies model the reality of their networks for over 30 years now. Our Safety and Infrastructure Division provides location-based network and outage management solutions for improving engineering and operations. The challenge is now that we've created and housed the data, how can we exploit it in applications and workflows throughout the utilities business operations? We help utilities control the data and enhance its accuracy while driving efficiencies. We help unlock the network and structure data through the organization, leveraging open, standards-based technologies to address key challenges, such as joint use permitting. Our dedicated Canadian team supports customers across the country. We specialize in utility workflows, data collection and management, interfacing between systems and solving typical utility-based industry business workflows. Although focused in Canada, we're also looked to throughout the US and internationally as a set of go-to consultants in the organization. I'll now hand it over to to Helber, who will discuss the London Hydro experience with the joint use permitting application. Helber?
Well, thank you, Steve. So I'm Helber Vargas. I'm representing today London Hydro as a distribution engineer. London Hydro is the local distribution company that supplies electricity to the City of London. We have about 159,000 customers spread over 420 square kilometers. Among all of our assets, we have about 29 to 30,000 poles. And these are the poles that third-party companies are seeking to get approval on in order to attach their structures and infrastructures to it. And this process in which they want to attach their infrastructure to our poles is known as the joint use. So our next slide shows some of the documents that are submitted when a third party is looking for approval to do the joint use application. In Ontario, we are regulated under the regulation 2204. There are basically three items that regulate the joint use application process. The first one is the agreement between the third party and the local distribution company. The second one is the permit form, and the third one is the engineering drawings that are has to be stamped and have to have the certificate of approval by the professional engineer in Ontario. So in previous years, before implementing the joint use management portal that Steve will demonstrate later, what we used to have is how we centralize all these joint use applications was by using an email. So we had a joint use at londonhydro.com, and every joint use party will submit their applications, their drawings, their report. They will send it through email. Then it will get to our coordinator in London Hydro, and this coordinator will assign the different permits for different parties to different technologies or technicians for the review. So, and then at the same time, the coordinator will have to keep track of what applications were submitted, when they were submitted, and who was the reviewer for these applications. Then the reviewer will take the application and start the process back and forth with the third-party company, sending the quotes, the service order, what are the make-readies, all the processes that will the result of this review. And they will keep their own tracking system, their own sheets. So at the end, it was challenging to find out how to centralize all this information on different sheets, all of these different sheets, and how to have transparency across all the permits. So we don't have any conflicting permits from one company trying to attach to the same pole that another company submitted a permit for the day before. So that's why we engaged Hexagon. And as you can see in this slide that we have now, we have a very well-established process, very detailed and comprehensive. But the challenge was how to manage all these emails, multiple email communications, bulky applications, and different spreadsheets that we were keeping track. We were helping us to keep track of the applications. So that's why we engaged Hexagon, and we said, okay, we need a solution for this. And the solution was to do an automation. So our next slide shows that we use the same workflow, the same comprehensive set of steps to follow our joint use application, but now it's part of a system, of an automated system. So the main objective was, okay, we need to spend the time where we really need it, which is reviewing the application, review that the clearances are correct, that there are no conflicts, and we will do the make-readies and be able to process the application on time, which was very important. So there were a set of goals and objectives. So the first one was, okay, we need to create a way to keep a consistent workflow. So the problem with emails is that some companies will send a set of drawings or documents in one email, then they will send a different set of documents or emails or information in another email, and then the reviewer will have to go back and forth multiple times. So there was a lack of consistency. The next objective was, okay, we need a way to have transparency across all the people involved in the joint use process. So we wanted automated notifications. And it was a big concern. So now we're going to expose some of our information outside the corporation to third parties. So we needed to impose this cybersecurity layer in our application, and that was achieved working with Hexagon and our IT department. Another goal was, okay, now we want to eliminate that step where our reviewer will take that joint use documentation after approval, create a file, put it in a filing system. We use DocuShare, then get a link and get that link sent to GIS so they can make it part of the attribute of the pole. That was a very manual step that was avoided now using the joint use portal. Also, there was an interesting case, and I just mentioned it. If an applicant sends a permit today for pole 1 to 3, and then a new third party sends this an application for the same pole a week after, but the two permits were assigned to different technicians, we have some challenging situations where we had hundreds of poles trying to be that were part of two different permits for two different companies, and keeping track of all these details proved to be challenging at the time. So and now with all the evolving and more information, all the technology that we have, we wanted to be able to create easy reports and to be able to visualize what's going on with our joint use. So we wanted to have a dashboard that will show us in real time what's going on with the application, what is the status of the application, and what were the timelines that we were incurring when reviewing the application, how much time we were spending from submission to approval and from submission to review. So we have been using the joint use portal management portal for about 2 years now. Some of the benefits was that in the first phase we involved the third-party companies. They were very pleased. There are very nice features in the application that Steve will go over during the demonstration. The first one that I can mention is the how interactive it is, because we expose our pole locations and our pole numbers, so the applicants can go and select the poles that we have in our GIS system. So we can tag those poles since the moment they are trying to submit our application. We say, okay, there is somebody that's trying to submit our application for this pole. If there's somebody else, we will be notified, and then we'll put them in contact and they can work through these conflicts. Another benefit is that we have significantly reduced the response time to our permits. So it depends on the size of the permits. There are some permits that are for 3 poles. There are some permits that are for 100 or 200 poles. So the larger the permit, the more time that we need to spend. But now we are able to see, okay, this applicant is for this, is sending an application for 200 poles. So we can prioritize and improve our response times for joint use applications. Also, reporting. We have now the ability to run reports. Every single step through all these convoluted flow chart that we see there on the screen has a timestamp. So we can run reports, run some analytics, and the government is asking always for more information. So now we have it ready to go. Well, nowadays, the best part of it is with most of us should be familiar with the Broadband Act, the fast build for broadband. And this will certainly allow us to perform more analytics and see how we can improve our internal review processes in order to meet all these new demands of the industry. And now I'm going to turn the floor over to Steve, who's going to take us through a demonstration of the joint use portal.
Thanks. I hope I am unmuted this time. So I'm going to take you through a typical workflow we're using the application. I'm going to sign in as a third party. I'm going to initialize and submit an application, and then I'll switch over to the utility viewpoint and run it through part of the workflow there. So I'll start off being just a web-based application. Everything I'm doing with the portal here is really just done through a web browser. So I'm going to reach out and connect to my joint use portal. And I didn't want to sign in yet. We do need to make sure that, of course, it is authenticated. So because this is exposed to the internet, I'd have to sign in to get authenticated. So this is a demo system, and I'm going to log in as a Bell Canada representative. This is a test system I'm running here at the office. So as you can see, when the user first logs into the system, there's a dashboard that indicates the status of applications in the system. So these are all applications submitted by the customer, Bell Canada in this example, and what the state of those are. So just a little bit of a benchmark just to show us the applications that we've got. In this demonstration, all we're doing is we're presenting joint use-based applications. We have, and actually London has already started putting DIP and bond requests into the system, and I'll talk a little bit more about that a little bit later on. Here's also a look at actions that are pending on the customer side. So there are a number of applications that are still to be submitted. There are a number of applications, 3 here, that I need to act on to send the as-built back to the utility. And there's 4 applications that I need to revise because the utility has asked me to revise some of those applications. So a typical dashboard type application. If I needed to see more detail about all of those applications, I've got a grid view that exposes all of the applications, when the application was started, when was it last updated, what the current status of those applications are. Just a typical grid view that allows me to get into those applications and review them in more detail if I needed to. The pending actions is like an inbox. So these are applications that are yet to be worked on by me, whether that be they need to be submitted, or there's some revisions that need to happen, or I need to send an as-built back to the utility, and so on. But I'll take you through a new application process and see how streamlined that is. Again, this is just for joint use applications. Other applications would be listed here as they come online. So I've actually initiated joint use application number 90 here that we're going to follow. I'm going to open up that application so that I could submit it to the utility. So there's 3 tabs here, some general information that I see here, some poll information I'll come back to, and some documents that I add to the application itself. So I'll give it a description. This is a Bow Street rebuild that we're doing, and I need to tell the utility whether or not that a make ready is required or not required. And all of these fields, of course, are customizable, configurable to the utility's needs, depending on what you want to track. At any point in the process, if I attempt to submit the application, this is an important part. The application can't be submitted yet because I haven't filled in all the required information. As Helber mentioned, lots of applications came through the system in the old days that weren't complete. Well, this ensures that the application will be fully complete as defined by the utility before it even hits the utility's inbox. So optionally, I may have an internal number that I'm going to refer to this as. I'm going to put in my name and contact information. Of course, web browsers remember all that these days. There's a number of documents that I can associate with the application. There's a couple here. See the little blue stars indicating that they are actually required fields. So I'll come in here and I'll attach, in this case, an engineering report, information about the application that I'm putting forth, an engineering drawing. Now this could be a PDF or a CAD file that defines what's going on in that area. Optionally here, some existing permits, some structural analysis information, those kind of things could be attached as well. But at a minimum here, London is looking to have those two reports as part of the application. Then we come to identify the poles that are part of that application, and we start getting into some of the mapping capabilities. Now we're all familiar with the Google backdrop that I'm seeing here, and then I see these icons that represent the actual GIS poles that are in the system. We're also making use of Google's location services. So I know that I'm going to Bow Street in London. As you can see here, as we all used to with Google Maps and things these days, it automatically completes and tries to find the address, or in this case, just a street that I'm looking for. Of course, London Hydro didn't want to expose all of their GIS data. It's very limited what the user has to pick from here. So they've only exposed their pole locations. And as you can see, the tooltip there indicates the actual pole tag number that's on the pole. So we've chosen at this point not to expose the height and the class and inspection information and those kind of things. So, optionally, we could expose more data, but at this point, all we're really interested in is giving the third-party poles to select. So I can select individually the poles that are going to be part of this application, or quite often, you know, the poles in an area that are going to be part of this application. So it identifies the poles and the pole numbers that are part of the application for submission. I think I filled in everything that's required at this point. So I'll submit that application. And once I submit the application, it becomes read-only for me on the Bell side, because it'll then be in the hands of the utility. So once I get that application running, and I brought my email up here just on the side, just so that you'll see that I do get some notifications that start to happen. So I'm the joint use coordinator here at London Hydro. So I've got an email notification that came up to say, hey, a new joint use application number 90 has just been submitted by Bell Canada. So I know that I've got work to do and that a successful application has been submitted. So I'll sign out as Bell Canada, and I'll put on my London Hydro hat for a while. So I'll log in as my London Hydro user. You'll notice a second notification came up. There are some automated processes in the workflow that I'll come back to identify. As Albert mentioned, this notification tells the coordinator that this joint use application has overlapping poles with other pending applications. So that indicates that without me doing anything, the system has identified there are additional poles that have already had applications to them. I'll come back to that and show you what I mean by that. So the portal front end looks very similar, but there's some different statistics, of course, whereas the Bell Canada user only saw their applications. From a London Hydro perspective, we're seeing how many applications are submitted by Bell or by Rogers or by Cogeco or by any of the other third parties that are working with there. Obviously, with this demo system, we tend to use Bell quite a bit. But some of the same kind of statistics, but a little bit more global. All of the applications that are currently in the queue, including, of course, Joint Use 90 that just came up, and the pending actions again depending on who I log in as, and I happen to be the coordinator, these are tasks assigned to me for me to move applications through the workflow process. So as you'll see, that I need to assign roles of joint use application number 90 that just came in. So if I open up that task, you'll see the task in front of me is really just to assign the reviewer and the approver to this part of the workflow. So I'm making sure that the application comes in. I'm then assigning who's in charge of reviewing this information. And yes, I'm going to use myself as the reviewer. I'm also going to be the approver. So the reviewer role might be double checking the engineering drawings, making sure the content of the report is in place and everything looks good. Otherwise, and if it's not, they can return it back to the third party. And then the approver is the one that that rubber stamps it and takes it on to the next part of the workflow. So all I'm doing at this point is assigning roles to the application, and then I'll complete that. I just wanted to step back for 1 second because I wanted to identify something else just before I assign those roles. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back. This is the application number 90. And again, as we saw in the third party's portal, here's a list of those polls that are associated with the application. Here's that list of documents, and I can bring up and review those documents as I need to. But what I wanted to do is just highlight for you, and this is an image that Helber had on a couple of slides. It looks, it's quite extensive. But what I wanted to show is that this isn't just a static image. It is indeed a workflow that shows that the application was initialized and filled in and submitted by the third party. Then the application changed ownership back over to London Hydro. The coordinator was notified. You saw that email come in. The status was updated. It was submitted to the system. There was an automated process here that did the poll check, and that is designed to confirm to see if any of the polls have other pending applications by that user. And that resulted in the second email notification that I got. So this red block here highlighted indicates where the application sits today. So the reason I wanted to show that is because right now it's on the assign roles action, which is the action that I'm about to perform. So let's go to that action. Then I'll assign who's responsible for reviewing and approving. And obviously for demonstration purposes, so that I'm not logging in and logging out, I'm going to use myself for both of those. I'm going to complete that task. And I've pushed the application over to the next part of the process. So as a reviewer, I get notification that this has been assigned to me so that I can review that application. What I wanted to do, though, is just go back to the workflow just to show you that the red highlighted block was here, set roles. And what we just did is we performed that activity. We set the status, we notified the reviewer, and now the reviewer is ready to review that application. So rather than just be a picture that represents the entire workflow of the application from submission to closing, this actually allows you to identify The gray boxes are the path that the applications followed. The highlighted box represents where the application sits today. So this is a very useful way of identifying on the entire workflow where the application sits today, what are the next steps, where has it been, and so on and so forth. The entire workflow, we're not going to go through the entire workflow today for demonstration purposes, but obviously you can see there's an approval process that goes on. If the application requires make-ready work, there will be a quote that goes out. The quote goes out to the user, the applicant identifies it, they submit payment, and the entire payment stream is being followed as well. Also, there's a make-ready in here. If we're doing make-ready work, that happens in this workflow as well. Where does that happen? I think it's in here somewhere. There's the service order for the make-ready. The make-ready gets completed. The applicant is notified when the make-ready is complete, and then we wait for the as-built work to happen. So it is a pretty complete workflow. The workflows are adjustable by the customers. So some customers may choose to simplify the workflow a little bit. Some customers may have more detailed workflows. It's by no means locked into what you see here, but you can see that it is indeed dynamic, and as the document, as each application runs through the cycle, that changes. We've also got, of course, for auditing purposes, every step along the way, everybody that touches that application, whether that be submitting, assigning roles, reviewing the application, and so on and so forth, every step along the way, that information is being tracked in the system. And we even have a more in-depth log that indicates every single data entry that gets made in the system, who makes it, when the data entry was made, and so on and so forth. As Helber alluded to, you can imagine that the wealth of information now that is being stored on the application process, and how they can use that from a business intelligence standpoint to determine how long is it taking to get applications through. Are there any bottlenecks in the application process? When are the busiest parts of the calendar year for applications? And it helps in various different ways. So I took the application through the initial part of the workflow. What's the next step here? So at this point, I'm reviewing the application, and is it ready to move on to the approver? It is. Otherwise, I can return it to the applicant. So I'll say to the approver that the application looks good. And I could have some additional permit records that I may have to attach at this point. Is the make ready required, or is it not required? Of course, that might change depending on what I'm doing. So if it is required, is the payment required? So those trigger the various pieces of the workflow to identify when more work has to happen, and those kind of things. So I complete that stage of the workflow. Yes, please. And the application progresses. So where are we in our workflow now? This indicates that we've now gone through, we've set status, we've notified the approver, and we're now awaiting approval. So in the approver's bin, is the application waiting to be approved. Okay, so so as you can see, it becomes really simple, and the steps in taking us through that workflow are quite easy to perform. They're not that challenging in most cases. They're just simple questions and pushing the application to the next stage in the workflow until it's completed. So it's been working extremely well. The third parties don't have to ask the where my application is, where is it in the life cycle. They will constantly be made aware of where their application sits and what that needs to look like. And it works quite nicely. So as you can imagine, I could take another hour and a half potentially and take it through the entire workflow at some point. I'd be happy if someone wants to see additional steps of the workflow, but it can be somewhat repetitive, but it works quite nicely. What I'll also show, as Helber mentioned, is that the everything going on in the system, it was originally tied to these GIS pole assets. So the good thing there is, and I'll bring up our Hexagon GTechnology GIS. So this is the application that the engineering folks are using to do their work with their London Hydro assets in GTechnology. So if I'm working in my GIS and I'm querying information about that pole, I have a tab here that tells me that these are all of the pending applications relative to that pole. So now I think I extended mine for demonstration purposes. I know what London is doing is their engineers only really need to see approved applications. So it would only be approved applications listed. For demo purposes, I like to open it up and see application number 90 that we did today, and that's the application that I just submitted. So all of the information is exposed throughout the organizations. There's some additional work that London Hydro did recently to expose the finished application in PDF form. This would actually be a link to their document management system. I'm not going to get into the detail here, but this joint use permit form, this document or sample document is actually generated by the application. As soon as the application is approved, this document in PDF form is created and attached. Because of course, yes, we're a nice digital platform, but we still need paper at some point in time. So this allows us to have users sign those things off and things like that. So this is the piece too that, as you can see here, the full package would include all of the engineering drawings that were part of that joint use application and so on. So that would be exposed to anybody within the organization that have the engineering application or the web viewing application and those kind of things. So that's sort of what I really wanted to highlight and demo today. There were some next steps that we started to go through with London Hydro that I wanted to highlight. And I don't expect you to see the extensions here, but we did make some adjustments to the workflow after it was being used for a year. The business folks decided to have a clerk put together that package I just showed you, which is a hyperlink that gets exposed and logged into the document management system. Although that is a semi-manual process, we could integrate that into the workflow so that the clerk actually does that work and gets notified of that work needs to happen as part of the workflow. So there was a small extension that we did recently. What we're really proud of is the dip and bond requests that from the start of the project we knew we had to do. We started with the joint use version of the application. It was more complicated, and during our deployment, we did some knowledge transfer to the business folks in IT at London, and they actually then ran with it and they developed the dip and bond requests. So they have that. They're testing it internally now, and they'll be rolling that out within the coming months to the third parties as well. So we're quite happy that the customer was actually able to take that on and move it forward. So just as a quick summary, initially certainly the application had to be secure, confidential, and automated, as Helber mentioned. Security was important because this was an application being shared on the internet. Confidentiality, we needed to make sure that if I'm Joe third party, I'm going into the portal, it was important that I couldn't see anybody else's applications or what other third parties were doing. That had to be maintained. And as you can see, it's nicely automated so that the process follows a standard set of rules. The third parties can then monitor the applications themselves. They know exactly where the application lies, which applications are back in their hands to progress through the workflow. All of the team members that are third party and utility based are all kept in the loop by the notifications that are built into the system that are kind of nice. All that information being shared with the GIS and engineering folks was nice, because as they're doing work, road widening or what have you, they can see if there are pending applications out on any of those poles right in front of them. They don't have to go out to an external system. So they can let the appropriate parties know if they have plans to relocate plant while the application is still in process. And as you can see with that digital workflow, and as Helber mentioned, this new Build Broadband Faster bill that just got announced in Ontario, it's going to become really important for the utility to know exactly what the time frame is for get the applications through their systems. And the wealth of information that we've started to collect over the last couple of years lets London Hydro certainly better manage what they're doing and report on that. So those were some of the things that came out of the application. It was a great project, a great experience for Hexagon and London, and one that we're looking at putting into other utilities around Canada. So if you have further questions, both Roger, our account executive here with Hexagon, or Helber, or anybody at the London Hydro organization would certainly be happy to help out. But we do have a Q&A planned. It's just about 1:45, so feel free to to ask questions as you need.
Excellent. Thank you very much for that great presentation, guys, and then for that demonstration. I thought it was very, very insightful. We've actually got some great questions flowing in already, so in the interest of time, I'll jump right to them. So to start off, and feel free to come on camera, folks, if you guys would like, so we can so you can answer those questions for our audience. So the first question we got coming in: if there is something wrong with the paperwork submitted by the third party to the customer, how does communication take place within the portal? And then there's a part B to that question. Are there locations in the portal for specific instructions on what the LDC requires in an application or other paperwork so that things are clear?
Can take that one, Steve. Yes. Yeah. So if there is something wrong during the demonstration, Steve showed that there is a part where the reviewer can approve or reject the application. At every interaction between the reviewer and the third party, or between the approver and the reviewer, has a space for comments. So what we have seen during this almost 2 years that we implemented, the reviewer will say rejected, will reject it and make a notes, comments on why the application was rejected for, and the third party will be notified, and then they will be able to resubmit the documents, make the changes that they need to do, and then it will go directly to the reviewer. It won't go through the whole process again. There will be a communication between the reviewer and the third party. So that's the first part. I think that answers that part. So we do have a mechanism to notify the third party if there is something wrong. We reject it, make the comments, they will resubmit the documents or whatever to make any clarifications. So the second part, we thought about it, but we thought it was more of a, we deal with seven parties, most of them communication companies. So we thought that it was more of an education issue than just showing the documentation there. So we had at the beginning of the implementation, we have multiple meetings with third parties. We have 2 training sessions, and we also came up with a training manual. So not a training manual, so it's a licensee manual. So they can use the application and they will only see what happens on their end. They won't see our workflow. And we have our own manual for the employees. That was the way. And because the joint use process is actually regulated in Ontario, and the steps are very clear and what documentation they need. The engineering drawings with the stamp from an engineer and the certificate of approval. But that's, I think at some point, Mohammed said that we can include that as part of the portal. There are other utilities that put it in their own websites, all the requirements. But there was certainly a need for that educational part of the implementation and being in agreement with them. When we started the process, we consulted them. We say, okay, we're going to do it. We're going to do this. We don't need your permission. We are just informing you that we are going to do it because it's for the benefit for your own and our own benefits. We just wanted to streamline that process, make it much easier. Yeah.
Great, thanks. As a follow-up to that, how about billing? Does this system tie into the updating of permit counts and ultimate annual billing? And can this be automated through the system, in other words?
Good. So the system is not integrated with our billing system like the joint use portal, but what we have seen is how fast you can generate those numbers for finance. So how we operate every year at the beginning of the year, finance will send an email, say, Helber, how many polls we have for this company this year, how many polls for this, how are we going to build it? Now I don't have to go to a spreadsheet, for my spreadsheet, to the reviewer spreadsheet, the coordinator, which ones were approved and which ones are not. I just, as IT, give me a report of all the approved permits in 2020 and per company, number of polls and times. And then I just send that over to finance. It's much easier. It's not for sure, but it's much easier. Yeah.
For sure. Thank you. Is it possible for the LDC to alter the workflow by itself or on the fly, or Hexagon to make that happen?
I'm just going to say a little bit what we experience, and then I will leave Steve to talk about that. So right now we are implementing 2 different workflows. One for, they submit their application, they have the dips and bonding points for the first application, but then some companies, they have a new dip or a riser. for an underground service. So they will submit a different deep application. We're implementing that one on our own. Our own IT team is doing that. We are just finishing up this week the UAT, the user acceptance testing. And yeah, the short answer is yes, we are able, but it depends on your IT team. I don't know, there was a knowledge exchange with Steve and their team. And yeah, Steve, if you want to answer.
We're using, I'd love to show you, I don't have an opportunity to show you today, but we're using some pretty standard business process modeling software to allow you to do the modeling. So you saw that workflow image that I took the application through, that there is an administrative tool that the IT folks at London use that see that same image, but instead of, it's not just a static image. They can actually move those processes around, add new processes to that workflow, and adjust what's going on inside those processes. So yeah, we certainly like to end up with our utilities having the ability to do that kind of modeling and that kind of adjustment themselves. So the idea is that the entire solution is configurable from the end user perspective.
Great, thank you, gentlemen. Next question, how do you handle conflicts of attributes on the same pole in the GIS if these are being designed in two different work orders?
So this might be a good GIS question for me. Certainly the poles, and when it relates to the applications are associated with the pole assets themselves. And as you saw on the pole assets, there were any number of applications hanging off that pole. One thing, just to be perfectly clear, one thing we're not doing at this point in time is that, for obvious reasons, the application process is not actually adjusting or editing any of the data associated with that pole. So we don't run into, from an applications perspective, we don't run into any contingency information with poles as they may appear in different work orders. Our GIS, of course, has a job system that allows multiple users to propose changes to poles and handles conflicts and those kind of things. But none of that happens typically with the joint use application process with the way that it's designed today. I think that helps.
Yeah, I just will add that in the case that we have two applicants for the same pole line, it is our task of the pole owners to put them in contact. So the application, what it does is one party doesn't have visibility to what the other party is doing. That's for competitive reasons. So we manage that. If there is, if Fran is submitting an application and Steve submits one tomorrow, then our reviewers will say, okay, guys, two parties, you two are submitting a permit application for the same poles. You work it out and send us a design. That is good for that. So first come, first serves. But if there is somebody and the permit has not been approved, they will have to work on the design together.
Okay, great. So lots of good questions coming in. Next question, is there a way for third-party companies to see their existing or ongoing applications for joint use application on the map while they're generating new ones? Like simply changing the color of poles seen by the company while they're selecting where they need new joint use?
I think that's come up as a possibility. We're not doing it today. It absolutely is a possibility. So I think it's an item that we've discussed between Hexagon and London Hydro, and if London Hydro want to do that, that possibility is there. We're not doing it today, but yeah, I think it would be a natural progression.
Great. You mentioned London Hydro. There's a question if any other utilities are using Hexagon in Ontario, or is it just London Hydro right now?
Well, yeah, of course, Hexagon is used across the country, and our GIS and web-based applications are being used around the world even. The joint use portal specifically is designed on a piece of software called GConnect, and that GConnect framework that lets us deploy these web applications, whether it be a portal-based application like you saw today, or even just a web browser to view your data internally. That GConnect software is being used around the world also. The joint use side of things is just been deployed here at London Hydro, and we're currently looking at deploying it at a couple of other local Ontario customers, and we'll be rolling it out with other customers around North America to start. At that point, I think that gives you a bit of a broad understanding of where we are and where we're going.
For sure. You mentioned GIS, Steve. Is it able to adjust data within the GIS?
It could, if we wanted it to. We could actually do adjustments of data in GIS. We've got other portal types of applications that will be doing that depending on customers' needs. I was discussing with London Hydro this last week about their vegetation management solution that when we're looking at deploying some of that so that they'll actually be able to modify and capture these span elements in the application. I digress, but so yeah, as you can see, the application process is being tied to the GIS data using the unique keys that are associated with it. This application per se is not right now changing the GIS data itself, just associating the applications with the GIS data. Future applications could certainly make changes to the GIS if you wanted it to.
Great, thanks. We're running short time, so maybe just a couple more questions before we wrap up. Just want to confirm that there's the ability to track multiple attachment types, such as wireline equipment box, wireless devices, dips, laterals, etc. And can this system be used for different asset types, so distribution, transmission, microwave, etc.?
Well, some of those listed there, bonds and dips, have already been deployed by London Hydro. It would be the idea would be that the utility could probably take it on themselves and put some of those other pieces in place. Absolutely, right now we're just deploying pole assets for what we want to do. But if you wanted to deploy other devices that you had in your GIS and allow customers to tag those and do applications based off those, we could certainly do any of the data that exists in a GIS system. We could certainly address.
All right, perfect. I think we can do one more question. Is London Hydro recovering their Hexagon costs from third parties, or is it an expense?
Albert, you want to try that one?
That was a good question. It was an investment we did in order to improve our response times and to put the time that where we really needed. We was reviewing the applications. Yes, we are regulated. We charge every single party the same price as per the Ontario Energy Board. That's it.
Okay, great. I think we should wrap up now as we're heading into time. There were more questions, but we will try and get back to them after the webinar. But thank you for that great engagement to the audience, and thank you, gentlemen, for taking the time to answer those questions. So we'll wrap up today, but before we let everybody go, we'll just remind folks of our upcoming sessions. On May 20th, Forest Technology Systems will present our webinar on wildfire mitigation technology enhancements, supporting safety and resiliency of grid operations. So that should be a good one. On June 3rd, Kyan will present our next webinar on utility customer information system cloud decision, on-premise versus cloud. But all of CEA's future events and webinars can be found in our monthly newsletter on current affairs, or you can go to the news and events section on our website at electricity.ca. In closing, I'd once again like to thank Hexagon and Steve and Helgar for their great presentation, as well as our audience for joining us today. And that will conclude today's session. We'll look forward to talking with you next time. Everybody stay safe, and bye for now.